afternoon. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Nice, warm, beautiful spring day, still in the winter time of 2026 here in Irving, Texas. Welcome to Texas, right? We do that here. It's the way we roll. Sometime early this spring, we're liable to get a good winter day. That's how we roll in Texas. Oftentimes we wonder, one of the questions that gets pondered around, that has been pondered around for many years, is the issue of the falling away we read of in 2 Thessalonians 2. What does this mean? What exactly does this entail? Can we understand it? Can we get a grip on this? Because for years we've heard this. I know I personally have. I'm sure a lot of y'all are the same way. We've pondered these questions, this issue, and we've still never come up with an explanation of this. But there is an answer to this, and it's found, guess where? In the Scriptures. It's almost like Yahweh hid this in plain sight. And if it seems, once we go through this, and if it looks like he hid it in plain sight, you might say, Kurt, he hid this in plain sight. You know what? You'd be right. That's how he hid it from me all these years. In plain sight. Kind of like the pair of glasses I can't find, on my head. The pair I keep up here for just in case. With my name written on it, because that way I'll know which one's mine. But anyway, let's get an introduction going here. Let's try 2 Thessalonians 2. Let's start from there, because we can learn how this unfolds and how this is going to work and how all the deceptive practices concerning this will work because of patterns from times past. So let us please turn to 2 Thessalonians 2. We will start there. Now we're going to hear patterns. We're going to get a lot of patterns here. So let's go ahead and define pattern before I start in 2 Thessalonians 2. Let's get that out of the way. The definition for pattern. I found a few definitions online, but this is the pertinent one, the most pertinent, I'll say, I found online. This is according to vocabulary.com. So you might want to make note of that. According to vocabulary.com, it is something that repeats itself in a predictable way. Patterns may be found in a series of numbers. Johans has a lot of fun with that. They may be found in a series of numbers, in your couch material, and the habits of your neighbor. It could also refer to design or its customary behavior. And we're going to see lots of customary behavior. This is how the pattern will be relevant here. Now, with the word pattern defined, let us jump into 2 Thessalonians 2. A favorite chapter of a few of us in here for a long time, for one reason or another. Because Bob and I have discussed this several times over the years. And it can be a hard chapter to understand. I'll concede that. If we find this chapter hard to understand, I'll concede it most certainly is. But Yahweh hid the solution in plain sight. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 1. Now, brethren, concerning the coming of our Master, Yahshua Messiah, and our gathering together unto him, we ask you not to be soon shaken in mind, or troubled, either by spirit, or by word, or by letter, as if it came from us, as though the day of Messiah had come. Verse 3, let no one deceive you by any means. We read that a lot in the Scripture. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first. The man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called Yah or that is worshipped, so that he sits as Yah in the temple of Yah, showing that he himself is Yah. Quite a mouthful right there. Because do you not remember when I was still with you and I told you these things? And now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work, and he who restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way, and then the lawless one will be revealed, whom Yahweh will consume with the breath of his mouth and destroy with the brightness of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is according to the workings of Satan, with all power, lying signs, and lying wonders. So we know who's behind this. And with all unrighteous deception amongst those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. For this reason, Yahweh will send them strong delusion, that they should believe the lie, that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Now, we will have the usual drill here. If you have a question or a comment or thought or an idea, just get your hand up. I'll call on you, okay? If you have any questions, feel free. Just feel free to ask. Okay, let's try a couple more passages. They're going to be very brief. Let's try 1 Timothy 4, please. 1 Timothy 4, the first 3 verses. First Timothy 4, verses 1 through 3. Now the Spirit expressly says that in the latter times some will depart from the faith, giving heed to spirits and the doctrines of demons, and speaking in lies, hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron, forbidding to marry, and commanding to abstain from foods which Yahweh has created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. Let's try 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 3. Actually, let's try let's just take second. Let's try 2 Timothy 3. Let's just take it from the top, shall we?
Yes, sir.
But let's just take it from the top. Know this, that in the last times, perilous times will come. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money. This is going to play a role. Lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to their parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, and despisers of good rather than lovers of Yah, having a form of righteousness but denying its power. Turn away from these people. For this is the sort who creep into households and make captives of gullible women laden down with sins, and led away by various lusts. Now the gullible women is, while at face value is a literal expression, but it's also a figure of speech. It's a double entendre, if you will. Because we don't get to say, us guys, boy, see, isn't it good not to be a woman? Isn't it great to be a guy? You know, that we're not like the she-male type. No. Because when you consider the double entendre, the double meaning, the figure of speech, it's not relegated to just the female type, to just the physical women. It can be to, what's the phrase I'm looking for? Girly men? Men who are not real men. They're weak. They're placid. They're not the kind of men that Yahweh wants men to be. They're always, verse 7, always learning and never able to come to a knowledge of the truth. Now, as Jannes and Jambres resisted Moses, so do these resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds, disapproved concerning their faith. But they will progress no further, as for their folly will be manifest unto all, as also theirs was. And let's drop down, remaining in 2 Timothy, let's drop down to chapter 4. We'll pick it up verse 1. We'll read 3 verses there. Or we'll read the first few verses out of 2 Timothy 4. Excuse me, not 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy 4. And I charge you therefore, because before Yahweh and the Master, Yahshua Messiah, who will judge the living and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom, preach the word. Be ready in season and out of season. Convince, rebuke, exhort, with all longsuffering and teaching. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers. They will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside unto fables. But be watchful in all things. Endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, and fulfill your ministry. So what is all this going to involve? Did we see of any type of this working in Scripture? Do we even see a little bit of this working actually in the gospel accounts? We got some warnings there too. Because what do we got so far? We got doctrines of demons. We're also going to, we just read here out of 1 Timothy. I said 2 Timothy 4. I just read out of 2 Timothy 4, and it works real well. My notes say 1 Timothy 4. Okay, let's just, can we flip over to 2 Timothy, 1 Timothy 4? I read that passage accidentally, but it fit real well. Boy, did it fit good. Now the Spirit expressly says that in the latter time some will depart from the faith, giving heed to the deceiving spirits, doctrines of demons, speaking lies, hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron, abstaining fruits which Yahweh created to be received with thanksgiving by those who know the truth. For every creature of Yahweh is good, and nothing is to be refused if it is received with thanksgiving, but is sanctified by the word of Yah and with prayer. So we see, what else? What all we see? We see lies, hypocrisy, people, the unrighteousness of the people. We see doctrines of, here shortly, we've read about doctrines of demons, and we got some more on doctrines of demons in 1 Corinthians 10, please, if you'll turn there. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Tom. I didn't see.
Right. You were so focused, I didn't want to disrupt you. But in verse 3 of 1 Timothy 4, this reminds me of the time that I was being in a catechism being taught by a Jesuit theological professor of all things. And I asked him, I said, in the Catholic Church, the ministers are forbidden to marry. And you're told to abstain from any kind of fish on Fridays.
I remember the growing up that way. Oh, yes.
So this is meaningful to you because you've had that background. And for others that haven't, that's one of the things that they are involved with, forbidding a priest to marry. Unless you're an Episcopalian, and if you have a wife and children, wink, wink, they give you free pass.
Mm-hmm.
Rather hypocritical. But anyway, forbidding to marry and commanding to abstain from meats, which Yahweh has created to be received with thanksgiving of them which believe and know the truth. Well, you know the truth by looking in the Torah about this thing about me. But this is the phenomenon that over 1 billion people in the world are told has to do with a conscience that actually they've seared with a hot iron. They have involved with doctrines of devils, teaching to be forbidding to marry, and certain flesh food that they're once a week forbidden to eat. So when I brought that to the attention of this leader of the Catholic Church, and no small leader in the sense of being a Jesuit of all things, and a professor of theology, he said, well, that's not for today. Doesn't apply to us.
Mm-hmm.
I said, so the Spirit is not speaking expressly in the latter times. These are not part of the latter times. He got all red in the face, and of course, all over, as I've said many times, he told me we really couldn't continue on with the lessons, the catechism. And it's because he came right up against Scripture that was specifically applicable to the very things they claim teach. And the Bible does not teach what they teach. And I was very thankful that I realized that just because somebody's got their collar turned around and professes to be a minister of the gospel, not necessarily so.
Okay, let's try 2 Corinthians 10. Let's pick it up in verse 14. We really want to focus on verse 21, but if we'll start up at 14, that'll give us some context. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. 1 Corinthians 10. We're going to pick it up verse 14, go through verse 22. Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. I speak as to wise men. Judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Messiah? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Messiah? For we, though many, are one bread and one body, and we all partake of that one bread. Observe Israel after the flesh. Are not those who eat the sacrifices partakers of the altar? So what am I saying then? That an idol is anything, or what is offered to idols is anything? Rather, that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice unto demons, and not unto Yahweh. And I do not want you to have fellowship with demons, because you cannot drink the cup of Yahweh and the cup of demons. And you cannot partake Yahweh's table, nor and the table of demons. Or do we provoke Yahweh to jealousy? And are we stronger than he? So we see several things in operation here. Traditions. We still got a little bit more here, but let's try Colossians 2:8, please. Because we're going to see traditions of men creep into here as well. How and why people fall away from their faith. Or the faith, I should say, not necessarily their faith. Colossians 2, verse 8. Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit, that according to the tradition of men, and according to the basic principles of the world, not according to Messiah. So what do we see here? When we talk about traditions of men, we get empty deceit. Round and round we go. We get philosophy, but how much truth is really found in philosophy? Worthwhile truth. We get empty deceit. We get the old song and dance. And it's like Tom brought up in his antidote. This is what we do in this, that, and some other church. And that point came up in the Tino's study as well. But do these stand up to the test of Scripture? No, they do not. Growing up Catholic, trust me, I know the drill. These things do not stand up to Scripture. They're, in fact, their own ways and their own customs. Let us try, please. Galatians 1. Verses 8 and 9. Actually, let's back up to verse 6, please, shall we? Let's back up to verse 6. I think a little context will help us here as well. Galatians 1, we're going to pick up at verse 6.
Where are we?
Galatians 1, we're starting in verse 6. We're going to do 6 through 10. I marvel that you are turning away so soon from him who called you to the grace of Messiah and to a different gospel, which is not another. But there are some who trouble you and want to prevent the gospel of Messiah. But even if we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel other than what we have preached to you, let him be accursed. And I have said before, so now I say it again. If anyone preaches any other gospel to you other than what you have received, let him be accursed. For do I now persuade men or Yahweh? Do I seek to please men? For if I still please men, I would not be a bondservant of Messiah. Now, if he sought to please men, he'd be anything other than a bondservant of Messiah. You think of it out in this world. There's lots of avenues we could go here. And in Mark 7, we receive a good amount of this instruction on this. Now, we're not going to read all of it. We're not going to read all of Mark 7, but we will take it from the top and read a few verses from there. Then the Pharisees and some of the scribes came together unto him, having come from Jerusalem. Now when they saw that some of his disciples eat bread with defiled, or that is, meaning unwashed hands, they found fault. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands in a special way, according to the tradition of the elders. Now this is not the way Mama told you to wash your hands. You got to wash your wrist too, get all the way up to your elbow. You don't want to get that dirt and grime in the gravy now, do we? So he didn't mean what the way Mama told you to. Clean your fingernails. Don't want that engine grease in the gravy now, do we? No, but this was in a special way, and what they were doing most likely was one of two things. They were either copying the priest and the Levites over in the temple, duplicating their service, or it may have been something they brought with them back from Babylon. So we read on this a little once upon a time, and it seems to be that we found both. One was not exclusive of the other. They did both. Verse 4, for when they come from the marketplace, they don't eat unless they wash. And there are many other things which they have received and hold, like the washing of cups, pitchers, copper vessels, and couches. That sounds like a good reference back to the cleansing of the articles for the temple and the tabernacle, doesn't it? Copying that. Then the Pharisees and scribes who asked him, why do your disciples not walk according to do what Moses said and eat bread with unwashed? No, that's not what they said. Why do they not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashed hands? He didn't say, notice they didn't say, well, how come you don't obey Torah? Because if Joshua was this figure that came to abolish and do away with the Torah, he had a perfect chance to do this, didn't he? To explain his mission. He had a perfect opportunity. One of many, one of several. But he didn't do it. See, it talked about, it was they who were making these changes. He answered, verse 6, he answered and said unto them, well, as Isaiah prophesied of you, you hypocrites, as it is written, this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. So the commandments of men, their own commandments, their own traditions, their own ways became their own doctrines. Verse 8, for laying aside the commandment of Yahweh, you hold the tradition of men. So now, in order to lay aside, remember, these guys are busted. In order to keep their custom and their tradition, they have to lay aside the commandment. The washing of pitchers, cups, many other such things you do. Just simple outward, to appear righteous outwardly. Verse 9, all too well do you reject the commandment of Yah, that you may keep your tradition. It means laying it aside, laying the commandment aside, and rejecting the commandments of Yah to keep certain traditions. And we could go on and on about that. And we won't go any further in Mark 7 because Joshua gets very specific here. And there's a lot more of it going on in Matthew 23. For the sake of time, we won't go there. But anybody else? Anybody have any question or comment on what we have so far? Okay. Because if we are not right with Yahweh, sooner or later, those who are not right with Yahweh will eventually just fall away from the faith. Even if they keep it only outwardly. Even if they show up to Sabbath and all the feast days. Put on that righteous outwardly show, but the inside, they're still, they got a lot of home improvement to do. Now, so what do we have? I know I've said this before, but before we jump into our model here, our working model, if we will, connect the dots a bit. We got people following the customs and traditions of men. They're abiding, they're eating and drinking at the table of demons. They're partaking in the doctrines of demons. And of course, where does this all begin? The last one we're going to cover before we jump into Solomon is in First James chapter 1. First chapter of James. And let's pick it up in verse 12, please. We'll go through 18. James 1, verses 12 through 18. Now blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which Yahweh has promised to those who love him. Now let no one say, a little context is going to help here, but we're going to focus at the end of this passage, but this little context always helps. Let no one say when he is tempted, well, I'm tempted by Elohim, or because Yahweh cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he himself tempt anybody. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and is enticed. This is where this falling away begins. It's by our own weaknesses, by your own desires. And then we try to justify them. And then, when desire has conceived, it gives birth unto sin. And sin, when it's full grown, brings forth death. I found a phrase in verse 15 that says it gives birth to sin. Kind of the analogy of the baby. You know, like, boy, that's an ugly. Giving birth to sin, that's an ugly baby. Yes, Cheryl.
When we see this word sin, I find it helpful to use the better term, lawlessness, because sin is lawlessness.
Mm-hmm.
But when we read it as lawlessness, it shows how much that we pull away from Torah, and not just, the world has a definition of sin that includes so many different things that aren't part of Torah. So if we stick to lawlessness, I find that gives us a focus on Torah and about what is written.
And concealing that in our minds and our hearts, just like we're told to in Psalms. It's like we're told to, what Moses had told us in Deuteronomy. We put this way in our minds and our hearts.
Mm-hmm.
That won't happen to us. Remain steadfast here. Continuing on, verse 16. And here we go again. Do not be deceived, my brethren. Every good gift and every perfect gift comes from above, and has come down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation and no shadow of turning. So we know who it comes from, and he reminds us what it's like. He doesn't change. And of his own will, he brought us forth by the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of his creations. Well, this is where it all begins, right here. Their own weakness in our own hearts, because we see that with the devil himself, how he was created so beautiful, and yet he fell away because of his own shortcomings in his own heart. He got a load of how beautiful he was, and then he decided what he was given was not good enough, and he wanted to sit in Yahweh's throne. Yes, Cheryl.
Thessalonians 2 talked about the man of lawlessness.
Mm-hmm.
And it really drives it home who this man of lawlessness is when you look at that, because Yeshua said, think not, I've come to destroy the law of the prophets. The Christian Jesus, he did away with the law. He's the man of lawlessness.
Well, the concept of the discussion was not to go into the specific identities of the man thing, because I've heard several over the years. But what we will do now is we got these great points. Now we're going to go into our model. We are going to see these in action. We're going to place some connect the dots, and we're going to go to 1 Kings 11. Because for the first part of his reign, Solomon was doing just wonderful. He was off to a really great start. On 2 occasions, he had face-to-face visits. Yahweh came in, or Yahshua came and appeared to him twice. He was giving blessing, giving wise advice. He built the temple and the whole 9 yards. Off to a great start. Had peace on all his borders. But then, James chapter 1 kicks in. 1 Kings 11, verse 1. But King Solomon loved many foreign women, as well as the daughter of the Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, the Ammonites, the Edomites, Sidonians, and the Hittites. Weren't these the women that Abraham and Sarah detested? Weren't they made sick when Esau hooked up with some of these women? Aren't these the women that Esau hooked up with? In our previous study of... Yes, they were. Tino, yeah, Tino remembered. He's got his head nodding up now. Yes, they are. You know what, Tino? You're right about that. You remember correctly. They're the same ones Esau hooked up with. At least most of these listed. Especially the Edomites, yeah. We'll take away the Edomites because he was the father of them, but he hooked up with all the rest of them, didn't he? The ones that they did not want their son Jacob having anything to do with. From the nation whom Yahweh had said, chapter 2, verse 2. From the nations of whom Yahweh had said to the children of Israel, you shall not intermarry with them, nor they with you. They will turn your hearts, they will turn away your hearts after their Elohim, or their gods. And Solomon clung to these in love. Oh, but he loved them. He fell in love. Oh, ain't that just sweet? We got to add a touch of soap opera to this, don't we? And he had 700 wives, princesses, 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. No, these wives kept him busy, as we'll see here. For when it was so, Solomon was old, that his wives turned his heart after the other gods, and his heart was not loyal unto Yahweh, his Elohim, as was the heart of his father David. For Solomon went after the Asherah, the goddess of the Sidonians, and Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of Yahweh, and did not fully follow Yahweh, as did his father David. It goes from bad to worse. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, on the hill that is to the east of Jerusalem, for Molech, the abomination of the people of Ammon. And he did likewise for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and sacrificed unto them. Let's think about this. Let's back up just a moment. Let's pause here momentarily. How many wives did he have? He had 700. Plus 300 concubines. 1,000 honeydew list. Every married man I've ever known did good to keep up with one. Oh, the married men are smirking. They're smiling now. How can you keep up with 700 of these? I mean, can't you imagine all the drama of all these 700 wives and all these idols, high places, altars? They built to everything, anything and everything they worshipped. To the demons they worship. Oh, now we're kicking back in to what we read in James in all our previous readings. Their own customs, their own ways, tables of demons, doctrines of demons. Oh, honey, can you please build me an altar? Because if you love me, see, you built little Susie, you built her one, but you didn't build one for me. You don't love me, honey. If you love me as much as you love her, you'll build mine closer to the temple than you did hers. They'd start doing that Well, whatever it is they do to get a man to say yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, dear. The spirit of yes, dear is hard at work here, isn't it? The man who could not say no, dear, 700 times over. And it went to the point where he eventually came and worshiped them himself. Because verse 8 says right here in verse 8, and he did likewise to all his foreign wives, all 700 of them, who burned incense and sacrificed to their gods. So Yahweh became very angry with Solomon, verse 9, because his heart had turned away from Yahweh of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Now remember, and all these other beings that he worshipped, when did any of them ever appear to him? But we have two notices of Yahweh making appearances unto Solomon when he first took the throne, asked for wisdom. Then he asked him about concerning the building of the temple. So Yahweh became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from Yahweh of Israel, who had appeared to him twice and had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after foreign Elohim, but he did not keep what Yahweh had commanded. So now now what did we just read of a little while ago? That you had to lay aside and reject the commandment in order to do these things? He didn't just overlook it. He rejected it, as it was explained in the previous readings. Imagine that, the wisest man alive being drawn away. And don't we see this step by step, what we read about in James? The shortness of our own heart. Being at work here. Don't we read? I'm going to pause here. I'm going to reread a very short portion. Keep your place in a second. I'm just very briefly, you don't have to follow me, but I'm going to reread a very short portion of what we just read out of James. Chapter 1, verse 14. But each one is tempted when he is drawn away by his own desires and is enticed. I mean, in the case of Solomon, by 700 wives. Then when the desire, so it had to do with desires. To please, after all, he wanted to be a good husband and please his wives. But when desire had conceived, it gives birth to sin, or lawlessness. And sin, when it's full grown, brings forth death. Turns from an ugly baby to an ugly, full-grown man. That exactly is what happened with Solomon. Therefore, verse 11, back in 1 Kings 11, verse 11, therefore Yahweh said unto Solomon, because you have done this, and have not kept my covenant, my statutes, which I have commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your servant, death. Nevertheless, I will not do it in your days for the sake of your father David, for I will tear it out of the hand of your son. So his son would no longer rule the house of Israel. However, I will not tear away the whole kingdom. I will give one tribe to your son for the sake of my servant David, for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. So what's the fallout from this? Okay, so Solomon did this. So the rest of the house of Israel, they groaned and complained about Solomon, right? There was a lot of that, but or did they follow him in all his ways? Let's continue. Let's continue. It started with Solomon. And it spread like a cancer unto the rest of the house of Israel. Verse 14, remaining in 1 Kings 11. Now Solomon raised up an adversary. Now Yahweh raised up an adversary, Now Yahweh raised up an adversary against Solomon. Hadad the Edomite. He was a descendant of the king in Edom. Wasn't that did he marry an Edomite wife? He had one we know about. And it happened when David was in Edom, Joab, the commander of the army, had gone up to bury the slain, but after he had killed every male in Edom, because for 6 months Joab remained there with all Israel until he had cut down every male in Edom, that Hadad had fled to go to Egypt, and certain Edomites of his father's servants with him. Hadad was still a little child, so David still, we read this in another account, David virtually demolished the house of Esau, the house of Edom, but he didn't quite get everybody. Remember there was the 450 that escaped on camels? Hadad was, as a little kid, he was one of them. And he rose up, verse 18. They rose from Midian and came to Paran. They took up men with them from Paran and came to Egypt, to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Boy, here we go again. Another one. He married an Egyptian woman. Remember? Now he's got his own wives given refuge to the enemies that were rising up against him. And so he gave him as wife. So Hadad found great favor in the sight of Pharaoh, and he gave him the sister of his own wife, that is, the sister of Queen Taphanes. It goes on down a bit more here. Now, let's pick up in verse 26. So if we start seeing adversaries starting to rise up against Solomon, they're regaining strength. All feuds that had seemingly been healed, at least resolved, or at least healed, bandaged, are now coming back to life. Old wounds are being reopened, aren't they? Verse 26, then Solomon's servant, Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, an Ephraimite from Zerada, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow, also rebelled against the king. So now he's got rebellions rising up, not just outside problems, but now he's got problems inside. The man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, and Solomon, seeing that the young man was industrious, made him an officer of the labor of the house of Joseph. So Jeroboam, from verses 26 on through verse 33, or the rest of the chapter virtually discusses the rebellion of Jeroboam. So now he's got a rebellion in his own house, just like his father David did. So what do we make of all this? Because now we see, eventually, the house of Israel, the kingdom of Israel is split. Southern kingdom, we have Judah, Levi, and a few loyalists from the northern tribes trickle down into Judah, but the rest of Israel, they follow Rehoboam. They followed. They follow they follow this new king of Israel. They follow. Now the story continues in the next chapter over. Let's pick it up, please, in verse 25. Actually, let's back up a little bit, because we got a vote against Rehoboam, discussed in chapter 12, and we'll pick it up after some messengers to the new king. We're in chapter 12 of 1 Kings, and we're going to start in verse 12. This is where we're going to begin to see the split in the house of Israel. So Jeroboam, verse 12, Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the third day, as the king had directed, when he said, come back to me on the third day. And the king answered the people roughly, and rejected the advice which the elders had given him. And he spoke to them according to the advice of the young man, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. So the king did not listen to the people, for the turn of events was from Yahweh. Remember, this is Yahweh tearing King Israel away from the house of Solomon. He caused the deafness and the rejection of sound advice, the new king, that he might fulfill his word, which Yahweh had spoken by Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Now when all of Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, what share have we here in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now see to your own house, O David. So Israel departed to their tents. But Rehoboam reigned over the children of Israel, who dwelt in the cities of Judah. King Rehoboam. So now we see the split. Two kingdoms instead of just one. Let's drop down to verse 25, shall we? Remaining in, because here's the fallout continues. There's the falling away. The people are still falling. The fall is not yet complete. Remember, what Solomon did was just the start. It was bad enough, but it's about to go to bad to worse. We read about people going from bad to worse in the final days, didn't we? We're going to have a working model of that too. Then Jeroboam built in Shechem, the mountains of Ephraim, and dwelt there. And he went out there and built Penuel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom may return to the house of David. Now if these people go up and offer sacrifices to the house of Yahweh at Jerusalem, then the heart of the people will turn back unto their master, Rehoboam the king of Judah, and they will kill me and go back to Rehoboam the king of Judah. Therefore the king asked advice. So now he's now the new king of Israel, the other 10 tribes. He needs help. He made now he didn't do like Solomon did and ask of Yahweh. No, and he did this. He did the following. Therefore the king asked for advice. Made 2 calves of gold. Boy, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Here we go, these golden calves again. He didn't just make one, he made 2 of them this time. This guy, we're going to outdo that. We can do 2. And said to the people, it is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Now, so here are your guys, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. He didn't make just one. Make the proclamation like Aaron did. He built 2, made the same proclamation. He said one in Bethuel and the other he put in Dan. Now this thing became a sin, for the people went up to worship the one as far as Dan. He made shrines on the high places and made priests from every class of people who were not the sons of Levi. So he's making priests out of essentially the people that were least qualified. So now we've got the rest of the house of Israel following. They're following in his ways. They're worshiping the golden calves. And Jeroboam ordered a feast on the 15th day of the 8th month. Like the feast that was... Remember, he didn't say... Let's look at this one closely. Jeroboam ordained a feast in the 15th day of the 8th month, like the feast that was in Judah, and offered sacrifices on the altar. So he did at Bethel, sacrificing to the calves that he had made. And at Bethel, he installed the priests of the high places he had made. Here's our working model of the falling away. Starts with a king. He made 700 wrong decisions, or 1,000 wrong decisions to start with, and they led to thousands of others. Solomon starts worshiping them. Not only did his wives worship at those places, but Solomon did too in the spirit of yes, dear, and the people followed suit and followed copy. Imagine that pattern over and over again. Got one righteous king, they'll praise and worship Yahweh for a season, but when he dies and his son takes over, they go back to their old ways, don't they? We read that time and again. And there, folks, is our working model of the falling away we read about in 2 Thessalonians 2. Any question, any comment, anybody? If not, we'll close here. And Johannes, okay, Cheryl, all right, Cheryl, you got your hand up.
So regarding his weakness was the women, we all need to examine ourselves for that thing that we might want that could draw us away, to protect us and keep us on his path of obedience and love. Because if you don't examine yourself and find out the thing that you desire, whether it be, his case was women, some people it might be job or money, clothes.
Mm-hmm.
For some people it's prestige, or they desire to be the head of some church, or, these things bring us to putting something before Yahweh's worship.
Damien.
Praise Yah. I was just reading there in 11. I know you didn't get to all of it, but it makes me think of Romans 8:28. He's working all things together for our good, for the good of all called according to his purpose. But the opposite is exactly the same. He will work everything for your bad, in a sense, if you're not called according to his purpose. In chapter 11, after we read about all the wives that Solomon had, he actually rose up 3 different people as an adversary against him in each of the kingdoms, falling from his father, from King David. Talks about Hadad, that he rose up as an adversary against him. Another one in verse 23, Rezon, the son of Eliad, who fled from his master. Right, all of these, as he said, to mention the Edomites and those who got away from them. And then, of course, Jeroboam, who was of his servant's house, right? He said, and the servant will come against you. So 3 different men rose up who were in his past or in his life already to come and tear the kingdom away, in a sense, or, he'd get to keep what he did because of the promise that was made before. But again, all those things that are a part of our lives, right, that are not focused on him, or not, as Sister Cheryl just said, obedient to him, right? They turn against us, in a sense.
No, when they said, what part have we to do with you, O house of David, the northern tribes? When they said that, they meant it in more ways than one, didn't they? They meant not just politically, but spiritually as well. If this kind of taxation and servitude was what the worship of Yahweh is about, they wanted nothing to do with it. And it all started with one man. And they had a domino, then it kicked off to a domino effect that didn't stop. Tom, the Bill asked comment. We're out of time, but go ahead, Tom.
It's apparent that for all the wisdom that is made available, wisdom does not absolutely assure you that you can continue in dutiful obedience to Yahweh. And like Cheryl said, whatever it is that you strongly desire above and beyond the things of the Most High, inevitably, it will lead you astray. And it shows that pre-incarnate Yahshua was infuriated because he tells Solomon, I came to you twice, personally. It wasn't just a prophet said, man, through the Ruach HaKodesh, I spoke to you. Because you had said you were asking for long life for your enemies or great wealth or armaments of warfare. And every single area where he said he wasn't asking for. Because of what happened with the women that he loved many. And it's tragic because it says of him that of the 1,000, he didn't find even one woman that he had this loving relationship with. That is pitiful. But it's very candid to show that even the very best that can happen to somebody, if they don't perpetuate their obedience over time, something will bring them down.
No choice. He never. It's like it never occurred to the sick woman of Yah.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Tina.
Yeah, real quick too. The kings were supposed to know the Torah, to have a copy.
Yes, they were supposed to write their own copy. You're correct.
And it goes right back to Deuteronomy 17:17. And just going right into just this one verse, it says, talking about the kings, Yahweh had already said, neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn away, neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver and gold. But right there in Torah, it plainly says it. Because it exactly what we read and what you were pointing out, that it was going to turn his heart away. And it's just as plain as that. And this is exactly what happened with Solomon.
Mm-hmm. Where was that about to? Deuteronomy 17?
Yeah, Deuteronomy 17:17.
And after this great falling out, we see that there will be very few actually following the way.
Mm-hmm.
The appointed path, if you will. Because most will find some type of appeal in it, and many will find that broad road that leads to destruction and follow that. If there's no further question or comment, we'll close here. And Johan, we'll be back here next Sabbath at 1 o'clock for the study. And who? All right. Damien will be up for the study next week at 1 o'clock, and Anthony will be up for the main message following.